Hello, I'm Sylvia Leiner Shordike, the founder of NeuroHorizons Experiential Movement education programs in California and Europe. I will be spending the next 20 minutes or so walking you through what I call everyday neuroplasticity. I start with the premise that relational intentional movement is the key to neuroplasticity. My passion is to teach parents and practitioners to become more aware and embodied. They learn to give effective experiential movement lessons that can make a huge difference in any child's developmental trajectory, and especially the child with special needs. I will then invite you to join me on the floor for a very brief taste of what my students learn, so that you can experience for yourself the reality of the native learning process and neuroplasticity. What is neuroplasticity? A lot of people are talking about it. We know now that the brain can change at any time. Even an injured brain can change. And that's how we work with kids with special needs, and we can help them. We use movement to create neuroplasticity. I believe everybody can learn themselves kinesthetically to experience movements so they can translate it to a child with special needs, and they learn to move with the child, to connect with the child, translate that into their hands to help a child that cannot find on their own those movements. We do learn by moving. Movement informs the brain. Movement informs how we relate to the environment and to gravity. Without movement, there is no life. So we need to create movement, we need to experience movement, and that's the only way we can feel ourselves in relation to the floor, in relation to our parent, in relation to environment altogether. And that's how the brain learns. We don't learn without movement. Our children that we work with, the child with special needs, they don't have these movements often, and we need to do everything we can through our embodiment to help them experience movement to inform the nervous system and the brain for neural mapping. That's our job. We create these experiences for the children who cannot access it themselves. I would like to give you a little example, and I invite you to join me on the floor. I teach my students about 150 movement experiences in my seminars, and one of them I want to show you right now. Please join me on the floor. So one of the things that a baby does when they're on the floor, you can imagine a baby, I'm talking about a typical baby right now, and it's very important to understand what a typical child does in order to understand a child that has special needs. So the typical child will have a lot of random movements. It rolls from side to side. The pelvis and head sometimes roll in different directions. The pelvis and the spine can roll to the other side. I'm just doing a few movements you can imagine, and later I will show you video of a child moving. Then you can connect the dots a little easier. So now, one of the things that randomly happens for a baby when they're on the back is that they throw their leg and it lands bent on the floor or a little straightened. I mean, it varies because these are all random movements. And the heel on the foot or parts of the foot hit the floor. So the leg gets thrown by the baby because it's feeling well and it's exploring. And all of a sudden they kick. Or I should say the foot lands on the floor. And what happens, because their pelvis is light, it rolls the pelvis slightly to the side. So every time the foot lands in different places, more on the toes, more on the side of the foot, more on the heel,
sometimes on top, sometimes the push with the toe, different variations. These are all random movements that are very, very important to inform the child. What is happening right now is neuroplasticity. They feel, they relate to the floor, to gravity, to the environment. And the movement and the relationship to the floor, to gravity in the environment informs the brain, their nervous system. They feel they have a leg. They feel they have a pelvis. They feel there is some weight shift. I'm shifting more on my ribs up there. I'm shifting more on this side of my pelvis. They feel that. That's an organic learning process, which is neuroplasticity. They make new connection as they move constantly, as a little baby. Let's do this movement more in I say adult version. This is, for example, one of the moves of many moves I teach in my class in different variations. If you put your bent leg like this, so it's just bent, so your foot is somewhere in proximity to your pelvis, so you're comfortable. And then just now, slow down a little bit, because you really want to take your time to feel this. And you just push a little bit with your foot into the floor. And feel, if you do that, can you with this movement allow in this case, I'm using my right leg, the right hip to come off the floor a touch. Feel if the movement of leaning with your foot into the floor creates a movement in the pelvis so that your right hip comes off a little bit off the floor. That means you will feel more weight going onto the left side of your pelvis. So just focus on that. We're not going to go into bigger details. We're just going to make it really simple. And now put your foot, every time you do this movement, in a slightly different position. That is a variation of movement, a variation of a random movement that a baby does. The foot lands in different places. So you create that in yourself as an adult who's already walking for a while. And every time, if you take a moment, and maybe you want to close your eyes, and every time you have the foot in a slightly different position as you push into the floor, maybe you can notice that feels slightly different in your pelvis or anywhere above the pelvis. Maybe it's a little different angle. The angle feels in yourself, in your center, slightly different. So you can do this, feel, explore. You don't have any ambition right now. You just want to feel. You're curious about yourself. Do this for a while. And now let this leg go. Straighten the leg and just take a moment with your eyes closed to feel if you sense a difference between the sensations you have in your right side, especially probably your right leg, and compare it with the left. One leg maybe feels a little longer than the other. The right leg that you push through, does it feel a little longer? Does it feel a little bigger? Do you feel maybe your head is going more in that direction? Is the foot lying slightly different in an angle? And if you don't believe, you can actually look. So I hope you feel a difference, and I hope that was interesting to you. Now I'll come up again. This was one example. Oh, and I feel
a difference throughout my whole right side now that I'm sitting here. How powerful movement can be if you take the time and if you listen to yourself. And this is what happens to the child on the floor. To a typical developing child, it's so important they get the time on the floor for these random movements. This little girl, she's exploring. At the moment, she figured out that when she pushes with the 2 feet, 2 heels mainly, into the floor, her pelvis lifts off a bit and then she lets it drop. And she likes the sensation, she likes the feeling, so she keeps doing it. This is a very typical random movement they do while they feel themselves in relationship to their environment and to the floor. And this is what I did with you, actually. It's the same idea. The only thing is that she mostly does it with 2 legs at the same time. And that makes the whole pelvis come off and not just only one side of your pelvis. When we did it with the right leg, only your right hip came off. If you did it with both hips would come off. And these movements are already beginning to map the child's nervous system for later standing and walking. Amy Pickler was a brilliant observer of what children were doing in their own development. And she realized that if you give the children enough time, they will always come to a very similar outcome, a little faster or slower. But if you give them the space to explore, they will all come to a beautiful organization. And she realized that children who are raised that way have a lot fewer injuries. They fall less. And if they fall gracefully. They are better climbers. They have a better coordination and self-esteem to explore in the world. And that was with quote-unquote typical children, but we work with children with special needs. And we have to give them time, we have to help them to explore, to feel themselves, to know themselves, and give them time to come step by step to their next developmental process. And you cannot force it or push it or demand it. That's just not how it works. Again, this is a typical child that is moving here on the floor. But why is this important? By understanding what a typical child does, you have the opportunity to learn those native moves and embody it in yourself. That is what makes you understand more how to translate and transmit through your hands into the child with special needs. So it goes back and forth between understanding the typical child and how to learn then to help a child with special needs. Another very practical example is how to pick up your child. And again, this is for the typical child, but also for the child with special needs. And if you feel in yourself how a child would naturally come to sit, you can create with your own kinesthetic movement and sensation the experience of going with the child. Again, daily neuroplasticity, move with your child, moving with your child. First, take a look at this video of me lifting a baby. And then we will experience the same movement in ourselves.
Pick up the baby. Yes, how do you pick up the baby?
So you can come from here under the yeah, it's okay. So she's already participating, you know, that because what I don't want her to go to come straight in the middle and her head to hang back and then she's gonna contract. See, she's already trying to help me come through the straight. But I just want to help.
Hi, yes, right. Oh, yes, right.
See, and then I can kind of, for example, pick her up like this. But you see that that over the side, help her to roll over the side, kind of in a spiral coming up. instead of through the middle. And even when you want to put her back down, same thing. It can be, that's right, that's your side. Ooh, hi, yes, it's okay. Yes, it's right. And we do it slow. Oh, that's nice. Should we do it to the other side too? Do you want to do it to the other side? Yes, okay. Look. And wait for her to, that she brings the eyes. Whoops, see there, she wants to come to the middle. That's because she's used to that already. I'm just gonna go here. Hi, yes, it's right. That's easier for you. That's okay, then we take that side. And then eventually the other side will be easy too. And I scoop you up, and there you are. You can see how I take some time to, first of all, I feel the preference of where the child wants to go to. Her preference is going to the right. And I wait for her to look towards me and come and touch with the head towards me. And this is where I also lean down, because I'm communicating with the child. I'm saying something to the child. And she's curious about me. She feels me. And then I do a very similar movement coming up in an arc. And then I kind of bring her into my lap. And that's a very different experience than somebody coming and picking the child up only with the arms, like an object. First of all, often too fast for the child. And then I pick the child up and I pick it just straight up in a straight line and fast and only with my arms. That would be a completely different experience for the child. It's a typical child or a child with special needs, same thing. I'm going to show you now the difference between two ways of coming up to sit. The adult, and actually often the children with special needs, are trying to come up through the middle, like this. Often adults, tell them come up to sit, and then they shuffle themselves up straight through the middle. Which, you can do. A person who can sit, they can do that. But a child, there are many different ways of coming to sit. Usually they will come out of a rolling position, an arcing position. And then they lift their head and they get round. And then they go through the side to go somewhere. Because the transition, we call that transition to go to another place, is a rounding, rolling motion. But they want to maybe see something and they want to grab their toy and then they come and so on. So if you learn in yourself that this is more comfortable, more efficient, there's not so much, kind of contraction going on. You get tense, you have to hold your breath. So and if you pick the child up very fast in the middle, most of the time they contract. They get actually a little spastic, even typical children can for a moment. And they don't know where it's going to go. And so if you understand that, and then you really give the child time to come on its side, and if you go in an arc, in a more spiral movement, they can follow you, they feel safe all the way until they're in your lap. And for that, you just have to slow down a bit, and you have to feel where you are yourself in space. When you embody that yourself, that sensation and what it can do for you, with that, you as a parent, or that's what our practitioners do, because they can aesthetically know what it feels like, what it does to them, they can translate it into the child with special needs who cannot generate it on their own. And there are hundreds of these kind of movements, and the same principles apply to them, and it can all be learned. So in my world, everyday neuroplasticity, what does it mean? We feel, we relate to gravity and movement, and that is what makes the native learning process happen. It doesn't take much to pay attention to yourself when you move, when you reach, when you clean. Check in with yourself and feel and slow down when you learn to move more efficiently or more to your optimal. The child feels that right away. So there you go. There you have moving with your child on a daily basis, with no matter what you do. I like to say that when we adults embody these learning experiences for ourselves, we empower ourselves to empower the child with special needs. We become able to invite the child to join us in a relational, mutual dance of exploration, learning, and transformation. I will end by assuring you that you can learn this. And I encourage you to be in touch with me if you have any questions, and also for more information about my California and European programs.